Today we are looking at reproduction, topical practice set 2. Okay, please look at question 9. We will start off with the open-ended question on page 7. Alright, Ellie counted the number of 2 different types of young plants at various distances from their parent plants in the garden. The results are shown below. So, let's employ what we have learned in our experimental answering technique booklet. So the first thing we know that since it is an experiment, there will be the change variable. And then there will also be the measured variable. So in this case, the different type of young plants would be your change variable, and the measured variable would be distance from parent plant. Please copy down all annotations. Annotations are very important because they help you to narrow down what is the topic and help you understand the demands of the question. Additionally, you may not have to, in very realistic terms, you may not be able to annotate everything in an exam setting. But when you annotate during normal practice paper, it makes it so much more explicit, okay, and you'll be habitual for you. Okay, so that in exam, you're very fast to realize what is happening. Now, based on the graph above, which of the following is likely to be the fruit of plant A and B? So what is the difference between A and B? You will notice would be that for plant A, which is the white colored one, okay, as the okay, what you will notice is this. This is distance from parent plant. So you will notice that a lot more number of plants, okay, this is the number of plants, alright, is actually at a further distance for A. This tells me that the dispersal method of this particular plant A must be a method that allows the seeds to be dispersed at a further range. So things include maybe animal dispersal, okay, or maybe even water, alright, and wind definitely. Now for animal dispersal, you would be, I mean it's not here, it's not in this question, but just to let you know, in a real life scenario for animal dispersal, you could find that the graph is not this way, but a more flat curve. The reason is because animals not necessarily always disperse seeds further away from plants. They can go very far, but they can also just drop the seed nearby. Okay, it's pretty random. Alright, but there is a chance of the seed being further away. This is just additional information. And then after that, for your young plant B, you will notice that a lot more number of plants, or the young plants, are actually very near to the parent plant. So this tells me that the dispersal method of this plant B must be one that usually disperse the seeds near it. Alright, so you then relate this information to what you already know. You will realize that B is probably dispersal by explosive mechanism. Not explosion, explosive, okay, or splitting. So therefore, if the first part they ask you to identify, your B would actually be this one over here. Now, how do you know that this plant employs the explosive mechanism? You take a look at the fruit. It's a pod-like structure. So because it's a pod-like structure, it tells you that it disperses by explosive action. Whereas the other one is by wind because it's got wing-like structure. Okay, and this is plant A. Now, how do we then explain or account for our answer? So, how do we know that A is actually wind dispersal? The first thing we must do is we need to talk about, alright, what it is. What are the structures that tells me is dispersed by wind? So that will be the wing-like structure. Okay. So it has a wing-like structure. This is the evidence that is shown in the picture. So what does it mean? It means that it's dispersed by wind and is able to be carried further away from the parent plant. So this information over here actually came from the graph, right? Because a larger number of plants for A is actually found at a further distance, right? So when you compare 4 meter, you get more plants compared to 1 meter, right? Similarly, you would answer in the same structure for B, whereby you give evidence. Since it is a pod-like structure, it will disperse by the explosive method. Hence, more of the young plant would then be found nearer to the parent plant. This part over here is data from the graph. Alright, so you put the 2 and 2 together, right? Evidence and then how it relates to the graph. You link these 2 points together for each one. So some of you have left out the evidence part about the pod-like or about the wing-like structure. Okay, so without this part, you cannot justify why do you think it's dispersed by that method and not any other method. Like I say, for it to have this kind of data, especially for A, there are a few possibilities. It can be by wind, it can also be by animals or even by water. You see what I'm saying? So why is it by wind? Because you talk about the wing-like structure. Alright, so when we look at the next question, okay, Sarah conducted an experiment. Once again, it's experiment, which means that you can use your experimental answering techniques to find out how the height at which CA is dropped affects the distance it travels. Okay, so that you are changing the height, so this is your change variable. And then after that, this is your measured variable. Okay, CA has a 5 cm wing-like structure as shown below. Okay, so because it's a wing-like structure, I know that it's dispersed by wind. So I'm going to just annotate it here. Now when she dropped it from a height, she measured the distance traveled. That's what she did. Okay, so then she recorded her results in a table below. Now, whenever you have a table, I always tell you to do your arrows to show the trend. So in this case, we know that as the height increases, alright, your distance from your parent distance traveled will also increase. Okay, now the problem that most students have with crafting this answer is the fact that you don't give reference. You know, when there is a trend, you can describe the trend. So the trend here would be the higher the seed is dropped from the tree, the further the seed will land from the parent plant. Okay? Some of you don't have any point of reference as well. You just go, oh, the further it lands from where? You know what I mean? When you talk about distance, there should always be a reference point. That's one. Okay? Then after that, this is extremely pertinent, very important. This is something that students tend to lack up, many of you. You don't bother to say the second part. Okay? Because they say, why is it an advantage? So if they are asking for an advantage and you just tell me that, oh, the higher it's being dropped from, the further it lands from the parent plant. How is that an advantage? Then you go on to explain about reducing overcrowding. But that's not enough. So the overcrowding part always ties together with the next point. And the next point would be, they will not need to compete for space, water, mineral salts, and light. This is very important. I'm going to bracket this out in red. This whole thing must be written as one whole point. In exam, you probably might get half a mark for saying reduce overcrowding or prevent overcrowding. Another half mark for telling me then what does it reduce in, which is competition for the 4 important points. Okay, sometimes the mark allocation can change, but this whole entire 2 sentences needs to come as a single marking point. So it's not good enough to just say overcrowding. I stress, it is not good enough. These 2 things needs to come together as one. Alright, and then the next thing I want to stress is, to be safe, do not put sunlight, because many of times in urban Singapore, a lot of vegetation is grown indoor. Right, they are grown indoor. They use artificial grow lights, which is not sunlight, and they are perfectly healthy. Next, Sarah used the same seed throughout the experiment. Give two reasons how using the same seeds make the experiment a fair test. So remember yesterday I talked about fair test, and I said the way to know what to answer is flip the question around. What if you do not use the same seed? What will be affected? So the mass, so you think about it. If I don't use the same seed, okay, the distance that the seed will travel might change, which is your results, right? Why? Because having a different seed might mean that one seed has a certain mass, another seed has a different mass. One seed might have a certain wingspan, another seed might have a different length or wingspan, right? And all this would affect the distance that the seed travels. Because the only change variable in this case is that you want to change the height at which your seed is being dropped from. Anything else needs to be remain the same. However, you cannot talk about everything else under the stars. You have to talk about the same seed. So to narrow down and know what the question wants you to answer, you flip the question. You ask yourself, what if I don't use the same seed? What is being changed? Then you realize, the mass of my seed might change, the length of the wingspan might change. Okay? Some of you actually said the type of seed. Now, we are going to, okay, you're not technically wrong, but at the same time, it is not the best answer. Because the answer is really trying to tell you, given that it's the same type of seed, but it's a different one. Okay, it's a different one. Why cannot use? Now, then after that, I want to talk a little bit about this mass. Some of you didn't say mass, you say weight. I actually highlighted that out for you. Technically, you are not wrong, but mass and weight is not the same. Why? Mass does not equals to weight. Okay, it is not the same. It is not the same. Weight is the amount of gravitational force that is acting on an object. So your weight might change. Say, on Earth you weigh 40 kg, on the moon you may weigh 30. But does your mass change? No, your mass will never change, because mass talks about the amount of matter that is used to make up an object. or a substance. So for example, think about it. If you have a Lego piece, say you make a Lego robot, okay, and what happens is that this Lego robot weighs 10 kg on Earth and 5 kg on the moon. My question is, when you move this robot from the Earth to the moon, was there any lesser amount of substance used to make this robot? Did you reduce anything? No, it still has the same amount of substance. But yet, the weight changes, it got reduced. You see the difference, class? You need to be careful about what you are writing. Okay? This is actually fundamental because if you don't get this right, when you go up to P6, you're going to have a hard time understanding forces. Alright? So I'm forward teaching you. Mass and weight, they're two different things, but weight is affected by your mass. Because the more mass you have, the heavier you are. It's as simple as that. Next. Sarah then conducted another experiment to find out if the size of the wing, this is the change variable, on seat A affects the distance it travels. Suggest two variables that she has to keep constant, which means the same, okay, when conducting the experiment. Now, whenever you're asked to actually talk about the same variable or whatever variable, I need you to give me the quantifying term. Okay, I need the quantifying term. It cannot just simply be, okay, the seat, the what of the seat, okay, the mass of the seat, the size of the seat, okay, the type of seat, what of the seat, okay. And then after that, don't just say the height. Sometimes you all just go the height. Be specific. The height at which the seat will drop. Okay, don't tell me things like location. So some of you actually wrote location. I have explicitly told you not to write location. Check your paper. Did you write location? I'm going to write it here. Please reject a very big X on location. This is not good, wrong. Okay? Now, why? So for example, if I'm conducting a photosynthesis experiment, I say conduct the experiment in the lab, and you say same location. But if I put the experimental setup on the table and under the table, is it still in the lab? Is it at the same location? Yes, but the results will differ because the one that is under the table will not get any light from the ceiling fans. Oh, sorry, from the ceiling lights. So please do not put location. There are so many other better answers. Okay, that's what I'm saying.